Everyone. My name is Deborah Williams, and I'm the chair of the Program and School Services Committee. And I'd like to call today's meeting to order and welcome the committee members, trustees, staff, and members of the public. We'll begin the meeting with a land acknowledgement. So everyone that's able, please stand. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Please be seated. So I just need a mover and a seconder for approval of the agenda. Moved by Trustee King, Trustee Dawson, seconded by Trustee Shan. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. So trustees, we have had a chance to review the agenda. Oh, excuse me. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. And the next agenda item, delegations. Trustees have had a chance to review the delegations package. It's been circulated, it's been distributed to trustees. It includes written delegation submissions, and I welcome everyone to read those. And we have our delegations here. Our first delegation is Jacqueline Wild, TDSB parent, who's here in person. So delegates, I just want to, at the very beginning, just set the tone, the conduct of delegations. The delegates are expected to provide input in a respectful and constructive manner. Delegates may voice concerns, but must not promote hate, harassment, or violate the Ontario Human Rights Code, TDSB policies and procedures. Must not use offensive language, obscene or defamatory language, gestures, or images, use negative or derogatory personal references, and must not misuse personal information related to TDSB students, staff, or trustees. Not to discuss topics outside of their intended delegation, and not discuss matters related to litigation or potential litigation or any matter which is currently before any court or administrative tribunal affecting the TDSB, and not cross-debate with other delegates, staff, trustees, or trustees of the board. So those are the expectations of the conduct of delegates. Just up front to give everyone the lay of the land with regard to the conduct expected. And welcome our first delegate. We have Jacqueline Wild, TDSB parent in person. Welcome. And each delegate will have 3 minutes to present their delegation. The 3 minutes is due to the time constraints for this meeting. And after you've delegated, please remain seated. We'll give trustees an opportunity to ask questions of clarification only, and the question and response is allowed a total of 3 minutes. Welcome, and you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Jackie Wild, and I have 3 kids in the TDSB. My oldest in grade 11 learned to read by osmosis. My youngest in grade 4 needed direct phonetic instruction to learn to read, but it clicked by the beginning of grade 3. My middle daughter, who's now in grade 7, struggled greatly with reading. Leveled readers led to tears and fights. Sound to letter combinations were a struggle in kindergarten. In grade 2, she was placed in the Empower program, which at our school was 2 to 3 times a week with about 7 students in a group. We saw no progress with her reading. At the IST meeting, following a psych ed assessment of severe dyslexia, we were offered accommodations, software, and a modified academic program. All wonderful, but how is she going to learn how to read? Silence. Eventually, the psychologist admitted that she needed a high-frequency literacy program, structured literacy program, and that she likely could learn to read, but that they couldn't recommend anything particular because they cannot provide it. I've since learned that what she needed was a Tier 3 reading intervention, one-to-one daily structured literacy program to skill mastery. The tiered approach to intervention, which is mentioned in today's literacy plan, estimates that about 5% of students will require such an intervention. In our school, which is Essex Hawthorne, we have about 190 students in grades 4 to 8, and about 10 who have gone through Empower with no change. And that's right around 5%. There are many research-based programs that have been proven to be really effective with students with this learning profile, and many are available in school systems across North America, but not in Toronto. Here, the only way to access it is privately, which costs tens of thousands of dollars per child. This, as the Ontario Human Rights Council has made clear, is a human rights issue. It is a central equity issue as families who possibly can leave the public system, and many go into debt to teach their child to read. Those who cannot have children, who do not have children who fall further behind with deteriorating mental health and who frankly hate school. All of these children need emergency intervention, and they need it now, not in 2028 or even 2026. So today I urge the board to ask for specifics on how this 5% of students fit into the literacy plan presented today. The language around the tiered intervention is not detailed enough, and schools and families really desperately need this in our local schools. We know how to teach these students to read, and that will give them agency, and I'm hopeful that this can happen soon. Thank you. I made it with 9 minutes to go, 9 seconds to go.
Perfect timing. Thank you. I have Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much. Would you be able to send a copy of your oral delegation? Because I think it's really important. I didn't absorb all of it, and I would very much like to read it again. Thank you.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Trustee McLean?
Chair, you indicated that there were other jurisdictions that offered the program that you suggested. Are there any in the province of Ontario?
Yes, there are. Right now, for example, Peel, they started a pilot project with a company, and this was called a Tier 3 intervention, and they rolled it out to a bunch of test schools, and it was so effective in the test schools that they're now training a person for every single school to offer this particular. It's called SRA corrective reading, but there are a whole bunch of different programs that can work. So I know, like near North School Board, there are a bunch of Catholic school boards, they're First Nation schools who have these programs that are in place. And since the Right to Read report 2 years ago, a lot of boards have really, this was one of the areas of sort of immediate low-hanging fruit, I guess, but it's really expensive and hard to put together. So I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit. Like, I totally understand why this is hard to put together. But yes, it's happening in other boards in Ontario.
Thank you very much. I have nothing further, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have anyone else on the list? Can I pass the chair? Okay. Thank you. So I just have a question of clarification. You mentioned the various tiers and Empower. Could you just clarify what you see as the difference and the possible impact of each tier?
Yeah, for sure. So the tier model, Tier 1 is supposed to be given to everybody. Tier 2 is going to be to a group of perhaps 20% of students, and to Tier 3 is for about 5%. So in a structured literacy program, which is where it looks like the board is going, and in fact, most of North America is going towards in its early literacy approach. Tier 1 is a structured literacy approach that does a lot of phonics and phonemic awareness, and the teachers directly teach the students. It can be a little bit boring, admittedly, but and about 40% of kids will just learn to read regardless, but lots and lots of students really need to be taught how to read because our brains don't really do that automatically. And so that's the Tier 1, and it should be offered to everybody. Tier 2 is a more intensive approach, which is what my daughter got with the Empower program. The Empower program in this organization is tier 2 because it's 2 or 3 times a week. It's not daily. It's in a small group. In hers, it was 6 or 7 students, so of the same age, but of a really wide capacity. And then they can't wait until every single student has skill mastery because they have to go on to the next lesson at the next day. So what would happen with my child is that she would circle all the right things and she'd follow the directions perfectly, but it didn't actually go in. She didn't really understand, and what she needed was to do that exact lesson probably 30 times more than the other students, because that's just what her brain needs in order to understand this. Tier 3 is daily. It's a structured literacy, and it's one-on-one. So it's expensive, but it's really effective. And I would say that we had to go private to teach our daughter how to read, and we found her a daily structured literacy program, and it took 2 chunks of 2 years. It cost a lot of money, and we borrowed money to make it happen, and she's now in grade 7, and she will never learn to read. She'll never probably read a book for pleasure, but she can read her math tests, and she can read instructions, and she feels good about herself, and she can read a book when she listens to an audio guide. So, but that was essential for our family. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll take back the chair. Were there any other trustee questions in the room, online? Thank you so much for your delegation and for coming and sharing that with us, Mrs. Wild.
Thank you.
The next delegate is Joseph Taylor, TDSB parent. I believe Mr. Taylor is online. Mr. Taylor.
Hello.
Welcome. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My delegation will focus on the TDSB's deeply troubling, racist, and inaccurate mischaracterization of the Grassy Narrows River Run. We attended the event with our 7- and 9-year-old children independent of their school. It was a child-friendly, inclusive, and meaningful educational opportunity. We read books with community groups who taught children about the importance of water. As the blue shirts we were encouraged to wear signified, water is life, a simple and powerful truth. The event was a crucial opportunity for us all to learn about Indigenous rights and our role as Canadians in colonization. At no point during the river run were my children unsafe, forced to wear blue shirts, indoctrinated, or experienced anything harmful. My children do not live the reality that the children of Grassy Narrows live. Their bodies have not been poisoned by the water. This event was an age-appropriate way for them to learn about their shared responsibility to contribute to positive social change, both locally and globally. TDSB Social Justice Action Plan stated goals. While the event may have evoked discomfort and provoked challenging discussions for some, it was and remains a critical learning opportunity for everyone. Grassy Narrows' struggle to regain control of their land is a story that is being replayed by Indigenous people across Canada and around the world. Thanks to the hard work and dedication of my children's teachers, educational support staff, Indigenous educators, and Indigenous members of our school community, my children have been taught about their role as settlers in our collective journey towards truth and reconciliation. As my children's Jewish mother shared in her written delegation, and I quote, "The notion that Jewish students should be exempt from these discussions is both disappointing and misguided. It is disheartening to see the needs of Indigenous families overlooked by the concerns of those in privileged positions. This response from parents only underscores the urgent need to educate the next generation to combat such ignorance and injustice." And so when I read the TDSB's apology last week, I was deeply disappointed in the board's profound failure of leadership. Instead of remaining focused on the core issue of Grassy Narrows' generational long struggle for justice, the TDSB prioritized the discomfort of some families. Members of Grassy Narrows should not have to demand justice year after year after year. Tragically, the TDSB's actions have contributed to the likelihood that they may, once again, have to travel thousands of kilometers to advocate for their basic human right to clean water. It is also completely unacceptable that the TDSB focused on the presence of Palestinian human rights supporters. It is once again a clear example of the TDSB's systemic and relentless anti-Palestinian racism problem. The TDSB have legitimized harmful narratives about those who attended the march and the demands for a more just society. When we see occupation as a crime, wherever that crime takes place, it is not the role of the TDSB to apologize for the discomfort this may cause. Whether that crime is mining companies encroaching on Grassy Narrows territories with the government support, or the illegal occupation of Palestine, as the International Court of Justice has made unequivocally clear, it is not the role of the TDSB to deny the legitimacy of a people's history and ongoing struggle in order to oppress them. Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission highlighted the dangers of such denials for us all. It is clear that the board at every level of leadership needs to urgently invest in renewed anti-Indigenous racism training and immediately embark on anti-Palestinian racism training. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Just hold on a moment. We'll see if there are any questions by trustees, either in the room or online. Trustees online? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for one moment. I see a hand. Trustee Hastings.
Okay, I'll give you that. Could you ask, through you, Madam Chair, if we can have a copy of that? I could barely understand what he was saying.
Thank you, Trustee Hastings. So, Mr. Taylor, please send in your written, the written delegation as well, so trustees can also read what you've presented.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts and your delegation with us.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good night. The next delegate, David Derenfeld, TDSB parent, who's online.
Hello.
Good evening. And if I've mispronounced your name, please correct me, Mr. Derenfeld. You have
That's correct.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
My name is Dr. David Derenfeld. I have family members and friends who are students and educators at the TDSB, and I'm a registered psychologist with more than 30 years experience as a clinician, researcher, and educator. What I have to say is for information only. I've not established a professional relationship with anyone related to the events of September 18, nor am I seeking to do so. I requested to speak today to discuss the potentially harmful psychological impact of the event of September 18. As reported by multiple sources, students and parents from 15 TDSB schools were told this would be an educational field trip. Allegedly, they were not told that students would be asked or pressured to participate in an anti-Israel protest. Allegedly, they were not told that some students would be asked to wear blue to identify themselves as so-called colonizers of Indigenous lands. I would like to briefly outline the potential psychological impact of the event of September 18 on students and parents. Children often rely on the trusted adults in their life, not only for guidance and safety, but also for a sense of self. When trust is betrayed, the effects can manifest in harmful ways later in life when those students become adults. Here are just 5 of those ways. 1, identity crisis. If an adult realizes they were manipulated as a child to engage in an activity that does not align with their values, they may experience a disruption to their sense of identity, leading to confusion and self-doubt. 2, shame. A person who realizes they were deceived as a child may experience self-blame that can fuel feelings of guilt, inadequacy, or worthlessness. 3, trust issues. When a person realizes they were lied to as a child, it can erode their ability to feel safe or vulnerable with others, leading to problems forming close relationships. 4, problems with authority. Adults who feel they were betrayed by childhood authority figures are at risk of developing a lifelong mistrust of such figures and consequent problems functioning effectively within institutions. For parents, The sense of betrayal may erode their trust in their teachers and school board's ability to safeguard their children. 5, negative emotions. Adults who are betrayed as children can experience a complex mix of emotions, such as grief and anger. For parents, the betrayal of trust can heighten their own anxiety, leading them to fear recurrence and to be hypervigilant over the child's interactions and surroundings. In summary, betrayal by a trusted adult can have far-reaching psychological impacts on students and parents. I hope the investigations into the event of September 18 results in swift, decisive action that will not only prevent such events from happening again, but will
Excuse
also
me.
ameliorate the
Mr.
potential
Dernfeld,
psychological
my
impact on the
apologies. Your
students and
3
parents
minutes
involved.
have expired. We're going to look to the room to see if any trustees have any questions of clarification. Any trustees online? Trustee Hastings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To you, Madam Chair, to the delegate, could you tell me you're on the last paragraph and I didn't quite get it. Could you let me have it?
So Trustee
So it
Hastings,
was,
one moment, please.
I didn't hear it. So that's clarification. Please tell me
Clarification of what you heard.
of what I'm supposed to have heard. He stopped halfway through.
So, Mr. Derenfeld, could you please send us a written copy of your complete delegation so that it can be shared with trustees? And then we all have an opportunity to read clearly what you've presented.
yes.
Thank you so much. Any other questions, either in the room or online? Trustee
Madam
Pei?
Chair, I have a question. Thank you.
Yes, Trustee Pei, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Derenfeld. I think you mentioned that, the board needed to the swift action and there are certain prevention measures. May I have a clarification on what kind of preventive measure, as you is a clinical psychologist, you would recommend to the board to do for those children?
My only recommendation is that the investigation results, if the investigation is done quickly and that it's done effectively and it's done decisively, and that if the findings warrant any change, that those changes take place.
Okay, as you are a clinician, what kind of mental support we should provide to those children who really feel they're being harmed?
I'm not suggesting that children have been harmed, so I'm not able to answer that question because I've not identified any harm in any children.
Okay, thank you very much for your delegation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Derenfeld, for your delegation. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
The next delegate, Ned Blinick, community member, here in person. Welcome, Mr. Blinick.
Thank you. I and my children, and now my grandchildren, have gone through the TDSB system. When I was in school some 60, 70 years ago, the focus was on academic or technical knowledge and skills necessary for our future success. Fast forward to today, our hyper-knowledge and technology-based world require our children to have a command of the fundamentals of math, science, and languages. Our highly diverse population requires our students to understand our history and civics to build shared perspectives and a cohesive society. Without these fundamentals, our children are robbed of the opportunity to have a better future. I have deep concerns about the divisive geopolitical advocacy and activism in our public school systems and their impact on our children and their future possibilities. I have grave concerns over the use of young school children being exposed to highly contentious geopolitical issues by educators who lack the expertise, understanding, or sensitivity to the subject matter. In our current highly charged and divisive socioeconomic political climate, Geopolitical issues that target and exclude one or more identifiable groups can only lead to adverse outcomes. School administrators and teachers must be taught to understand the destructive and divisive outcomes that highly explosive geopolitical subject matter and demonstrations can have on our young students, as evidenced by the Grassy Narrows excursion. With a highly diverse student body, the TDSB must ensure that all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or sexual orientation, are treated respectfully and inclusively. Over the past year, we have seen too many examples of administrators, staff, and teachers willfully or through lack of understanding and experience exposing many of our children to highly nuanced and hateful messaging. The TDSB must not tolerate divisive, exclusionary, or insensitive DEI educators and agendas. The TDSB must exercise its responsibility and ensure all its students, teachers, staff, and administrators are treated equally and respectfully. Canadian educators have fought too hard for inclusive policies and practice over the past 60 years. It is imperative that these gains not be lost to the divisive geopolitical agendas we are witnessing in our schools. If our city and Canada are to continue to be examples of multiculturalism and tolerance, the TDSB must ensure that DEI does not morph into division, exclusion, and intolerance in its schools, properties, and infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Blinick. Just hold on one moment. We'll see if there's any questions from trustees in the room. Trustees online? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again for coming and delegating for us this evening. The next delegate, James Hathaway, TDSB parent, virtually. Mr. Hathaway, are you there?
Hello?
Good evening. Mr. Hathaway, you
Hi there.
have 3 minutes, and then please hold on in the event that there's questions from trustees, questions of clarification. Please begin.
Sure thing. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is James Hathaway. My pronouns are he, him. My child is a student in the TDSB who have participated in the field trip to Grassy Narrows River Run Rally on September 18th. I was thrilled at first that they got the opportunity to observe this community action. Part of a healthy democracy is teaching children about the political process, and that includes the right of all groups to come together in public spaces to make their views heard. I think schools have an important role to play in encouraging participation in the community. My child said to me that they recognize this field trip as an opportunity to hear from people with diverse backgrounds, and they welcome the chance to learn outside of the classroom, as pretty much every kid does. This trip is part of fulfilling the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action by learning about the situation in Grassy Narrows from community elders themselves. The teachers were following the curriculum by teaching kids about the harms that are still being done to this community as I speak now. My child felt that the rally was safe, secure, and that all people were welcome. They were surrounded by teachers and other caring adults, and at no time felt unsafe or threatened. Our city is a diverse place. There are always going to be voices that we don't want to hear, but it is much better to teach our kids how to respond and to be resilient and to challenge those voices rather than to try to avoid perspectives that we don't agree with. I think if any TDSB members face repercussions for participating in this rally, I believe an injustice will be done to both them and to the students that they supported. In conclusion, the purpose of both the rally and the trip was to call for justice and to reduce the harm in the community of Grassy Narrows. Claiming that there were any other motives or results is disingenuous at best, and at worst, it silences the voices calling for justice. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Hathaway. I have a question from Trustee Dawson.
Sure.
Thank you, and through the chair, thank you, Mr. Hathaway, for coming and providing a delegation. You mentioned that your child or children went on the excursion. Can you clarify, please, how it was communicated to you by the school through the permission form?
The specifics of the language I won't remember, but when I read it, it was talking about the Grassy Narrows River Run Rally, which I had heard about in the public anyway. It was fairly public around where we live, and that it was a trip to listen to the elders, to hear about the situation in Grassy Narrows, and that they would be observing. It was very clear that they were observing, and that it was part of fulfilling the call to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Looking for any other questions in the room? Any trustees online? Seeing none. Thank you again for your delegation, Mr. Hathaway, and have a good evening.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
The next delegate, Valerie Laurie, TDSB parent virtually. Ms. Laurie, are you online? Welcome.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
I'm a parent of a grade 8 student at Earl Grey. My expectation of my children's teachers has always been that they help instill in my children a sense of social responsibility, both locally and globally. I've always appreciated the above and beyond efforts of my kids' teachers to encourage advocacy and civic engagement. Whether it was writing letters to PM Trudeau in support of Grassy Narrows, getting clean water, taking them to We Day, having pride parades out in the community, or doing community cleanups and walkouts for climate change, these are all ways our TDSB staff have taught my kids how to be advocates and upstanding citizens working for positive social change. I very much appreciate all of it. I trust their motives and judgment because I know they always take the utmost care for their students' hearts, minds, and bodies. Nothing has happened recently to cause me to doubt that belief. The TDSB social justice policy indicates that the goal is that each school participates and reports on one local action and one global action each year as part of school plans. These can include experiential opportunities both in the classroom and extracurricular. As attending a rally can be considered an extracurricular experiential opportunity, I do feel like it falls within policy guidelines. While I think there are opportunities to improve the excursion policy to better communications and permission slips, no one at the TDSB was wrong to offer this opportunity as a field trip. While one can't always predict who else is going to be at a rally, as it was, the rally was a beautiful show of solidarity between marginalized groups whose struggles are interconnected. Having spoken to parents who attended the excursion with their child, at no time did they feel the crowd was unsafe or the children at risk of harm. When asked, their children felt it was impactful to see truth and reconciliation in action after learning the same things in the classroom year over year. I would be remiss, however, to not mention why the parents who are most unhappy with this excursion are actually unhappy. It has very little to do with supporting Grassy Narrows' ongoing battle for clean water, and it's disappointing that that critical support and message is being lost amongst this fracas being raised by a small but loud group. I'm going to say the quiet part out loud and acknowledge that they are mad because Palestinians were there in solidarity. This is anti-Palestinian racism, full stop. First Nations folks have been standing up in solidarity with Palestinians for a long time. It is unsurprising and entirely appropriate that Palestinians would show up to support the First Nations of Turtle Island in turn. Palestinians exist. Their existence is not inherently detrimental to anyone, despite what some parents are saying. No, not a single child was in danger or harmed because there were people wearing keffiyehs nearby. The River Run was a peaceful people gathering in community and standing up together and for each other. Some may have felt discomfort in having their worldview challenged, but that is not harm. That is education. But kowtowing to powerful lobby groups who have heavily organized to raise this hue and cry is dangerous. Sure, update the excursion policy to better reflect the risk assessments and caveats required of the city we live in, but we cannot allow hate to color what and how we teach our kids or have our wonderful teachers face the threat of discipline for trying to teach them how to be upstanders. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Laurie. I do have a question in the room. Trustee Laskin, a question of clarification.
Thank you very much. Did I hear you correctly that you said it's anti-Palestinian to object to kids being exposed to the Palestinian signage that was at the rally?
Yes.
Thank you. I fundamentally disagree, and I also believe many of your statements were tropes that were anti-Semitic. Thank you.
Are there any
You
other
can feel how you like.
questions, trustees in the room? Any other questions of clarification? Trustees online? Nothing online? Thank you again for your delegation, Ms. Laurie. Have a good evening. The next delegate is Karima Saad, community member, here in person. Welcome. You have 3 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you. I'm here to share some broad insights about Canada's protest circuit and hate industry, speaking as a lawyer and journalist. The following is a non-exhaustive list of violence involving youth observed over the past few years at protests. Adult counter-protesters have thrown coffee at teenage protester, grabbed a teenager by the neck to retrieve a flag that belonged to neither of them, and sexually harassed a teenage protester. A parent instructed their 9-year-old to weaponize a sound device against adults. A police officer yanked a student protester by the hijab. One arrest involved a union member who allegedly punched a student in the face. Wooden dowels and sleeves, knives in pockets, flagpoles, electronic whistles, and megaphones have been used as weapons with children present. The types of people being drawn to protests do not always have good intentions, including anarchists, extremists, and folks with violent criminal records. There are even politicians. TDSB should be aware of the general lack of police willingness to address violence at protests. And yet, protests play a vital role in a functioning democracy. Protests are an important tool for expressing dissent, fostering dialogue, and initiating social change. TDSB is tasked with fostering an environment where students learn and develop into engaged citizens. This includes supporting students in understanding and participating in democratic processes like protests. And I have a few scenarios to consider. Student-led protests, where students independently organize. It shows commitment to the issues that matter to them. This should be encouraged. And although students must be held accountable to their codes of conduct, they should also have room to make mistakes. Any discomfort that may arise from such activities is likely a learning opportunity that will help shape future understanding of civil society. Students participating in adult-led protests, there is an inherent risk because of protests taking place in public and media coverage that can quickly turn viral, and students caught in controversial moments could find their futures affected by this viral footage. Additionally, protests can be volatile. An encounter with law enforcement, bystanders, or other protesters can escalate in a split second. The potential for injury or even emotional distress is considerable, and the liability for TDSB in such scenarios cannot be ignored. Students observing adult-led protests can offer a learning opportunity, but this must be done with care. Admin, teachers, and parents should be fully informed of the nature of the protest, and parallel education programming, such as a teach-in, can provide a structured environment.
Thank you, Ms. Syed. Sad. Thank you very much for your delegation. Trustee Dawson has a question of clarification.
Thank you so much for your delegation through the chair. I was wondering if you could please send us a copy, a written copy of it. And I just want to clarify some of the things you've said. So you noted in the beginning some of the safety risks, but also the importance of civil discourse through protest. So just to clarify, you are not against protests, it's just the potential risks that they could play.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
I take no issue with protest. In fact, I think it is a valuable component of what we're able to engage in as Canadian citizens. The incidents I described, and I would reiterate, this is the tip of the iceberg. We are in a strange time, and police reaction to violence at protests is patchy at best. And so I raise these issues for your consideration when thinking about what could a broader policy look like. This is already happening, right? And so anything that puts students in a scenario where more of this could happen, and some of these incidents happened on school property, at school boards, in Ottawa, in Toronto, and so it's already an issue. And I flag that simply because the part we should be encouraging is where it's student-led, student-initiated, or, as I mentioned, a parallel activity that could be a teach-in. It could involve protesters, but is nonetheless a structured and controlled environment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Trustee Laskin next.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to again comment for your words that can help us when we go to revise our policy. But secondly, as a journalist, for everything that you do to enlighten us about the reality of situations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee King.
You through you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Saad, for coming in for your delegation. You were very specific in using the word protest throughout your delegation and as a journalist. I know you appreciate that words matter. So just for clarity, would you make any distinction between something classified as a rally versus the experiences that you've described that are common to protests?
Words do matter, so thank you for that. Partly, I would say I was trying to respond to the 3-minute time, and so demonstration was too many syllables. I do think that some rallies are protests, but not all rallies are protests, which is maybe unhelpful. I would say, and I don't have a specific lexicon in mind, protest tends to, there's an element of something contentious, right? A rally can be simply a show of support for something, as opposed to there being an underlying issue or disagreement. I'm saying this off the top of my head, and when I discuss them, truly, rally, march, protest, demonstration, I use them fairly interchangeably, but this is food for thought. I hadn't really thought about the distinctions there.
Through the chair, thank you for just taking some time to think through that here. Just one follow-up question. You took some time explaining some of the occurrences that are common at protests or whatever, however you want to refer to them. Have you found in your capacity and experience that there are also generally best practices that are known and common in organizing and would be part of a consideration of care?
I would say it depends on the group that is in charge. And yes, there are general best practices, and I would say that the more old school organizers are very in touch with those. However, the best practices I don't think are adopted across the board. And I think that the current dynamic, at least in Ontario, because that's where all of my observations are based, is that it is a mixed landscape. And so having individual connections or a point of contact, and again, specifically knowing, okay, what is going to be included here? What chants are going to be used? You know, what's the subject? Like that all could be ascertained, but there needs to be some level of trust and communication.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions from trustees in the room or online, thank you again, Ms. Saad, for your delegation.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good evening. The next delegate, Michaela Berkovich, in person. Welcome.
Should I start?
So please begin.
Before the school year started, I wrote to the principal of my daughter's school, Trustee Laskin, and the superintendent as a concerned parent of a new student to the TDSB. She's in grade 9. Few things matter more in our education system than ensuring the safety and well-being of every student. In my email, I stated, I have been particularly alarmed at the lack of action taken against staff perpetuating hate and the resulting impact on our children who do not feel safe, welcome, or included in TDSB schools. In my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined that within 3 weeks of school start, Duplicitous teachers at multiple schools would conspire to mislead parents into believing their children would be observing a rally in support of Grassy Narrows First Nation, when in reality they had them participate in a protest with hateful, inflammatory, and discriminatory chants. Of course, parents want their children to learn about not just Grassy Narrows, other Indigenous community struggles with mercury and water. This is a travesty. I'm sure we can all agree, though, that learning opportunities were missed because school children were instead participating in performative social justice, sloganeering, and were used as political props by activist teachers. Given this is on the public record, I want to thank Minister Dunlop for taking action and asking her ministry to investigate the events that took place. I believe, however, there are much deeper issues that must be addressed by the TDSB, and the events of September 18th are simply a symptom of a broader cultural problem, namely the culture that allows for the political activism and the spreading of divisive ideologies by some staff to vulnerable children and youth. If you follow the news, I'm sure you do, you know parents and our premier are outraged and disappointed with TDSB's lack of focus on core subjects like numeracy, literacy, and critical thinking skills. This focus on victim narratives and this pathological obsession with the oppressor-oppressed narrative, forcing children to self-identify as colonizers and feel guilty for the potential sins of distant ancestors. It's not education, it's reverse discrimination and it's indoctrination. It's vital that the TDSB take immediate action to ensure that incidents aimed at fostering a climate of fear and insecurity do not continue. The TDSB can start by reviewing its policies. I would suggest making Coleman Hughes' book, The End of Race Politics, required reading. And it's time to enshrine educational and institutional neutrality to ensure a welcoming environment for all staff and students. Adopting Dr. Pay's No Geopolitical Activism in Schools motion and ensuring the use of ministry-approved resources in the classroom would be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation, Ms. Berkowitz. Are there any questions from trustees? Questions of clarification? Trustee Dawson.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation. You mentioned that there is public outrage over over the TDSB's lack of focus on core subjects like literacy and numeracy. Where did you get that information?
I read the news.
Okay. I encourage you to stay for our literacy report tonight.
I'm not saying that there is, actually, in fact, I even reached out to this nice lady behind me because I'm aware of literacy programs at children's treatment centers that I thought could help her. So it's not that the TDSB doesn't have any literacy and numeracy teaching. I'm saying that the focus has shifted to this social justice, oppressor, oppressed, colonizer narrative. I think you've lost the plot, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from trustees in the room or online? Seeing none, thank you for your delegation.
Thank you all very much.
Ms. Berkowitz. The next delegate, Ilana Kronik, virtually. Ms. Kronik, are you online? Ms. Kronik, are you online? Star 6 to unmute. Star 6 to unmute. Is she online?
Hello?
Okay,
Hello?
we can hear you now. Welcome.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes, and then please hold on just in case there are questions of clarification from trustees. Please begin.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Last year, my Jewish child started junior kindergarten at a TDSB school, and I was really excited for him. However, that feeling has dwindled as I'm concerned about the divisive geopolitical advocacy and activism I see unfolding in our public schools. And I don't believe that the classroom is a place for this. For example, I understand that the intent to go to the Grassy Narrows rally was to raise awareness about the community's efforts to address mercury contamination, but Our educated teachers and administrators needed to use some forethought to see that it was likely going to be another opportunity for extremists to hijack the rally and use it for their own purposes, as we recently saw at the Pride Parade. As a Jewish person who's often been afraid to identify as such, my heart goes out to the Jewish students who were forced by their teachers to participate in this rally where chants calling for their annihilation were heard. I imagine they too were afraid to identify as Jewish. It's my understanding that young rally goers heard, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which I hope you know is a rallying cry for terrorist groups and their sympathizers, as well as a common call to arms for pro-Palestinian activists calling for the establishment of a state of Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, erasing the state of Israel and its people. Jewish students at the Grassy Narrows rally had no adult to turn to feel safe, since the person that was supposed to be their safe adult was the one that brought them there in the first place. I believe that TDSB schools are becoming common places for children to be exposed to highly contentious socio-political issues at the hands of several activist teachers and others who have histories of promoting inflammatory, discriminatory, and hateful content. This is terrible. Our teachers, our administrators, they don't always have the expertise and sensitivity to address this subject matter without harming and excluding students. Bringing these issues into classrooms risks targeting and excluding one or more groups. This can easily lead to hateful and racist acts by teachers and students, which contradicts the TDSB statement that, quote, "hate and racism in any form has no place in schools and workplaces," and the TDSB is committed to interrupting and confronting it in all of its forms. I don't understand, therefore, how the TDSB on one hand promises to interrupt and confront racism, discrimination, and hate, but on the other takes students to a rally where there was discrimination and hateful acts, or discriminatory and hateful acts. With such a diverse student body and staff, the TDSB must keenly be aware that these contentious geopolitical issues can be impactful and damaging to both staff and students if not handled correctly, and therefore it should be kept out of our classrooms. It's the TDSB's responsibility to ensure all students and staff, regardless of race,
Thank you,
ethnicity,
Ms.
religion,
Cronic.
gender, sexual orientation, are
My
treated respectfully.
apologies.
I
Your
therefore
3
call
minutes have
everyone on the
expired.
TDSB to remember this,
So,
do a
Ms.
better job.
Cronic, at the
This
very
matters.
beginning, I indicated there were 3 minutes allowed, and
I
I'm
have my
trying to
timer.
be,
I had
I'm trying
5
to be
seconds.
fair by watching the clock and giving everyone their full 3 minutes.
I know I have
So
my
we have
timer here, and it
opportunity
said I
for
had 5 seconds.
trustees. Ms. Cronic, one moment. We have an opportunity for trustees in the room or online to ask questions of clarification. And I encourage you also to send your delegation in writing so all trustees can see what you've delegated. So I'm looking around the room. Any trustees in the room with questions of clarification? Any trustees online? No one online. Thank you again for your delegation, Ms. Cronic, and have a good evening.
You too, thanks.
The next delegate, Michael Tepper, Canadian Antisemitism Education Foundation, in person. Welcome, Mr. Tepper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Israel is fighting a hard war with local and regional enemies that seek to wipe it out and massacre its people. Israel is also defending itself in a world war, a propaganda war. Whether we like it or not, Canada is one of the battlefields of that propaganda war. I call it the soft war, and the Toronto District School Board is a prize in that war. As Canada's largest school board and a platform for the long-term shaping of popular opinion, it is indeed a propaganda war prize. So make no mistake, Israel's enemies in the soft war are playing the long game for control of this prize. Some of the hardcore fighters in the soft war work here. They're proud to operate under the slogan, "by any means necessary." The messages that they post on social media abundantly reveal what they're truly thinking, and it's no surprise that the events of September 18th turned out the way they did. Among other things, and I defer to Karima because she's got a lot more experience than I do, they have a shocking disregard for the privacy of our students. I do attend a lot of political gatherings and demonstrations, and I make a lot of speeches, including this one. There are risks and potential consequences. I'm an adult, and I appreciate them. Middle school students and elementary school students do not have the capacity to consent to those risks. In 2024 in Toronto, if you attend a demonstration, particularly one that deals with the Middle East conflict, you're likely to be recorded by strangers who don't necessarily like you or have your best interests at heart. It's legal to do that, even if you're a child. That recording can go anywhere. It can be edited or altered, and it can be used by anyone for any purpose. And if you don't like it, good luck finding them and suing them. That's why the recruiters and of the child soldiers in the propaganda war have such callous disregard for the safety of our children. It's damage that cannot be undone. And maybe that's one of the many reasons that so many parents and the provincial government are just a little bit upset with the board these days. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Tepper. Trustee Pay, question of clarification only, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Tepper, for your delegation. I have one question for you. Could you please clarify what you were describing about messages posted by TDS staff and on social media?
Thank you, Trustee Payne, through the chair. I do have numerous examples involving certain staff members, but I'm not going to comment about incumbent staff members because that's against the rules. Instead, I'm going to talk about a former staff member whose teaching license was suspended by the OCT. Here's an extract of what he had to say. Get ready. The plan for the Holocaust has been clear and has been set to be minimally painful. However, I still sense a degree of rebellious resistance against calling for a global execution plan for the Jews, even though they've killed us using wars, COVID, and whatnot, often cooked and consumed our flesh as shawarma and whatnot. Yes, that person actually did work for the TDSB as a French teacher 3 years ago. Just as an aside, I'm not all that confident the College of Teachers is all that much better than the TDSB, given that it's over 2 years and the college still hasn't gotten around to permanently revoking this fellow's teaching license. I have another one, actually, through the chair, Dr. Pay. This one doesn't come from a TDSB staff, but it comes from an independent DEI consultant retained by the board at $500 an hour as recently as 2022. Of course, what I'm about to read was said on September 13th of this year, and I don't know if she's continuing to be engaged with the TDSB, but in a view of her praising terror suicides, and I take it that suicide prevention is a major initiative and priority here at the TDSB, I really hope she doesn't hear or see the inside of his TDSB school building ever again. And here's what she has to say. This is, I think, the third American to self-immolate over the Palestinian genocide. The first, a woman in Atlanta whose name is unknown, and then Aaron Bushnell, and then Matt Nelson. I hope that their families are okay, and I hope their sacrifices don't go in vain. Dr. Pay, these statements are unacceptable, and they indicate a significant cultural problem at the TDSB that they are allowed inside the school, educating our students and speaking to our administrators and influencing their actions. Thank you, sir.
Trustee Pay, have you concluded your questions of clarification? The next Trustee Dawson.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Tepper. You mentioned that elementary and middle school students don't have the capacity to, I guess, understand, or I'm paraphrasing, understand the implications of attending a protest and some of the potential risks that could arise. What are your thoughts on secondary students?
That's a borderline situation. I think with the appropriate coaching and counseling and the opportunity to say no and walk out, it is possible for secondary school students at the grade 11 and 12 level to start experimenting with participation at political protests.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, looking around the room, any other questions of clarification? Looking online, seeing none. Thank you again for your delegation, Mr. Tepper.
Thank you.
Have a good night. The next delegate, Aaron Saris.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm here in lieu of
Online?
Aaron. My name's Naomi Lois.
Okay. Is that Aaron?
It's not Aaron. My name is Naomi Lois. There we go. May I proceed, Madam Chair?
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. As I said, I'm Naomi Lois. I'm a volunteer lawyer who's working to assist families who are confronting anti-Semitism in school boards across Canada. I'd like to speak to 3 issues today. First, safety. Second, inclusivity. And third, appropriateness for school trips. First, safety. Trustees, we call you that because we rely upon you to keep our children safe. Included in that is doing a thorough risk assessment of any activity that's being contemplated. We have heard earlier today some of the indications that the board should have had that this type of extracurricular activity could put our students' safety at risk. I've also seen communication from some of the teachers encouraging participants to wear masks, which may be because they were trying to avoid having their faces on cameras when they knew that they would be recorded. This also includes contingency planning in the event that unexpected events take place, and certainly accuracy when sharing with parents what is likely to happen and what risks are entailed before they give permission. We've heard today from some members of the public who said, my child felt safe. And I would encourage everyone here to take caution in using that when deciding whether or not, and when deciding how to assess the event. Just like we wouldn't say, one person said, it's okay, I wasn't sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein. We would not then assume it was safe for everyone, and the same caution should be taken. Inclusivity with respect to welcoming all participants, which ties in finally to appropriateness. It is not appropriate for a school to be taking children to a political rally. Mr. Taylor said he took his own child. That's fine for parents to make that decision. It is not within the scope of a school board to take any child to a political rally, to lobbying for any position. Even if every person in this room agreed 100% with the position being advocated, that is not the place for a school board. Most other school boards don't allow these types of activities. And that is because it is not the place of a school board to be forcing students to participate in any rally for any political position. This is not about discomfort, as we've heard from a few speakers. It's not simply discomfort for an 8-year-old child to be left feeling ashamed of their religious identity, particularly when they don't have another adult there, a safe adult, to help them manage those feelings and for emotional support. Ultimately, it is the school board's duty to teach our children how to think, not what to think. And here, bringing them together for a rally of a particular political position in an environment that was likely to become unsafe was completely inappropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Lewitt. I'm looking around the room to see if there are any questions of clarification from trustees. Any online? Nothing? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Lewitt, for your delegation. And please feel free to send it in writing so all trustees can have a look at that. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
The next delegate is Tarnjeet Sandhu, community member, online. Not in the waiting room? Okay, not here. So we'll go to the next delegate. Ali Sedatan, TDSB parent, in person. Welcome, Mr. Sedatan.
Siadatan, thank you.
Sedatan, thank you.
I'm just going to lower this if you don't mind. Hello, I was born in Iran, and when the revolution happened in 1979, and a small group of very, ideological radicals took over the whole country, the entire school system was revised by them, and it became a place of indoctrination. I was in elementary school, and by the time I was 10 years old, I came home, and this is a very private story. I'm now in my 50s, and I've never shared this with anybody privately or publicly. But after what happened on September 18th, I really was touched in my heart and felt I needed to come forward. So by the time I was 10 years old, I came home and I said to my mom that I want to go to the front and blow myself up under a tank because we were at war with Iraq, the neighboring country. And this was a religious war. They were Sunnis, we were Shias, and that was a trend among teenagers. And I came home and I said I wanted to go do that, and I sounded very euphoric and I sounded very excited. I was very, very okay with it. And when I became an adult, in one of our conversations, my mom told me that that was the day she decided to leave the country. Because we didn't come from a family that believed in any of those things. No one in my household spoke about that. In fact, people were very much against the regime. But it was the school system. That is where the idea was put in my head day after day. So this type of ideological indoctrination may seem benign, may seem enlightened, may seem interesting, as concocted in some university professor's mind. But I can tell you, as someone who was at the receiving end of it, it took me a lifetime to take these ideas out of myself and to come to a place where I had the maturity and enough knowledge about what was out there in the world to be able to discern for myself where I choose to stand. No one gave me that right as a child in school because the decision was made for me. And so I hope that it's clear that this has touched a chord in millions of people in this country. The Board of Education, the Minister of Education, the Premier of Ontario, it's on the front page of newspapers because children in elementary school and in junior high are not ready for ideological indoctrination, manipulation. They're there to be educated and to learn how to live in peace with others. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Sidatan. I'm looking around the room to see if there are any questions of clarification. Trustee Loka Rothman.
Hi.
Hi. I really just wanted to thank you so much. I'm sure it took a lot of courage to share your story, and I got chills listening to it. So I really, really appreciate the time that you took to come here and share your experience with us.
You're welcome. I hope it makes a difference. We have to really draw a clear line and agree as a culture, a society. This is about education. Maybe when they're older in grade 11, 12, they have the intellectual capacity. But until then, it's about education, not indoctrination or being ideological tools. And this is clear to everyone involved watching it. No one's pulling a wool on anybody's eyes. Everybody knows what happened. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much.
I'm just looking around the room and online to see if there are any.
Madam Chair, I want to make a comments.
You can ask a question of clarification.
Okay.
Do you have a question of clarification?
So, Mr. Sadadan, let me ask you a question.
Please do.
For you to clarify that, when you say the indoctrination at your country, you don't want to say the indoctrination of a TDS school board. So do you think there are any type of similarity in terms of indoctrination?
Yes, that's why I came forward. It's the tip of the iceberg. Of course, this is Canada. That was an Islamic revolution where the clergy of a particular sect took over the government and rebranded the Board of Education. This is not happening here at that speed, but I have a nose for this. And I can see that this is the beginning of that kind of a thinking. It doesn't matter if it comes in disguise or in stealth. Let's be clear. This is the beginning of a particular ideological group trying to utilize a public taxpayer asset to promote its thinking. And we won't stand for that, especially so many of us immigrants who've come from cultures where this exactly happened. We came here to this country to get away from such procedures and live in the free world where through discussion and the light of human reason, we will collectively decide what is right and wrong. We will not be told by a minority and certainly not have our children indoctrinated to it. So above all, we can see this coming a mile away, and so can tens of millions of Canadians.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sedan, for your wonderful delegation. I certainly share with you that indoctrination is now equal to education. That's what I heard from the parents. Thank you for a wonderful delegation. Really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Sidatan, for your delegation. Have a good night. So I see we have the delegate Tarnjeet Sandhu is with us online now. Tarnjeet Sandhu, are you there? *6 to unmute.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you now. So you have 3 minutes to present your delegation, and then please hold on in case there are any questions of clarification from trustees. Please begin.
Sure. My name is Tarnjeet Singh Sandhu, and I have a child in the TDSB. I'm here to speak about the Grassy Narrows field trip and what it evolved into. Nigel Baird, a vice president of the Elementary Teachers of Toronto, said, by apologizing for this field trip, this board is bowing to the Jewish lobby, a statement I find to be extremely offensive. I was born in India and am not Jewish. This is not a Jewish or religious issue. It is a teaching and a violation of parental trust issue. Everything I say today, I also say as an ally in promoting equity, opportunity, diversity, inclusion, and everything else one would associate with these ideals. I also say as an ally that the plot has been lost and often wildly conflated, and these important causes are losing people like me when hate and intolerance is being actively promoted, openly and insidiously, by people who should know better. The focus of teaching should be on the ministry-mandated curriculum, including reading, writing, math, etc. Giving our children the tools to think critically is quite different from teaching them what to think. And in this case, I believe this was the precise, premeditated, and coordinated goal of taking children to this protest. By knowingly and purposefully exposing children to a protest that included complex, generational, geopolitical issues where they would be hearing one side of an issue is not learning. It is indoctrination, and in this case, the ideas being indoctrinated are those of hate, a call for the genocide of Jews, and just plain garden variety anti-Semitism. If the teachers wanted our children to learn about the very important mercury poisoning issue, they should have left as soon as it devolved into a hate fest. But instead, they had the students marching, chanting, and receiving Zionism kills stickers. Leaving, rather than participating when this occurred, was a very real teachable moment. And I'm worried that staying to hear and participate in this hate was the actual lesson the teachers ended up teaching. Whether that was by accident or by design, I don't know. I do question the serious lack of judgment shown by the teachers by staying fully aware of the hateful slogans being chanted. Indoctrination has been festering for a while at the TDSB and recently has strongly grasped onto anti-Semitism. As you all know, manipulation of students by teachers with a political agenda contravenes board policy. The consequences for the false pretenses used for going on this field trip should not be a learning moment for the staff involved. Staying and participating in what happened was so egregious that it should be a disciplinary moment. And I would like to see the TDSB take action and prevent things like this from continuing or happening in the future to whomever the contingent of activist teachers decides will be their next target. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Sandhu. I'm looking around the room to see if there are any questions of clarification from trustees in the room or online. Seeing none. Thank you again for your delegation, Mr. Sandhu. Have a good evening.
Thank you, you too.
The next delegate, Aaron Kacharchuk. And if I mispronounced your name, please correct me. TDSB parent virtually. Are you there? *6 to unmute.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please begin. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Aaron, and I'm a TDSB parent. Apparently, the Ombudsman requires that an issue is brought to the attention of the institution before they'll accept a complaint. And I'm tired of the usual process of me sending emails to the TDSB and Ministry of Education outlining legal violations and not even receiving a response. Instead, now you can expect a series of delegations, each outlining various instances in which the TDSB breaks the law, so that it is perfectly clear to everyone, both that it has been brought to the TDSB's attention and that neither the TDSB nor the ministry intend to do anything about it. For today, we're going to talk about the last thing this committee approved. This committee's last meeting was in June. You know, the meeting in which the room was full of people shouting at you. But I'm not referring to the Combating Hate report. That was the second last thing this committee approved. No, the last thing approved by this committee was the annual Caring and Safe Schools report. This report violates the Anti-Racism Act, both because of what the report includes and what it doesn't include. Due to my shortened delegation today, I will keep this focused on a particular exclusion from this report that violates the law. So what was excluded from that report that violated the Anti-Racism Act? Well, it does not monitor for systemic anti-Semitism as required by that act. But let's back up. What does the Anti-Racism Act say? Well, Section 2 of OReg 267-18, made under the Anti-Racism Act, requires school boards to collect race, religion, and ethnic origin information as it pertains to suspension data, among other types of data. That same section requires, pursuant to Section 5 of the Anti-Racism Data Standards, the publication of this data, which the Caring and Safe School Annual Report attempts to satisfy. This data relating to racial and ethnic origin can be found on pages 15 and 16 of Appendix A of that report. But what you will not see in the annual report that you approved is any reporting as it relates to anti-Semitism. Nothing. At a time when the TDSB is actively under serious criticism for failing its Jewish students and staff, the TDSB is giving our elected representatives and the public reports that do not include legally required assessments of systemic anti-Semitism. And what could it find if the TDSB did release its data as required by law? Well, from data in this report and other reports, I can piece together part of the picture. For instance, the available data shows that as the proportion of incidents of anti-Semitism increases over time, the suspensions issued for hate crimes decreases over time. Put differently, as anti-Semitism becomes more prevalent, the TDSB has opted to be more tolerant of hate crimes. For example, 5 years ago, 100% of incidents of anti-Semitism resulted in a suspension, and now that it's become even more prevalent and severe, it is closer to 10% of anti-Semitic incidents result in a suspension. But again, that's only part of the picture because you don't comply with the law and publish anti-Semitism data, which raises the question, why is it that the TDSB is not conducting assessments of systemic anti-Semitism as legally required by the Anti-Racism Act?
Has expired.
Thank you.
I'm looking around the room to see if there are any. Trustee McLean.
Am I good? Thank you. Through the chair, can you share with me the basis of your assertion that 5 years ago, 100% of anti-Semitic instances resulted in suspensions?
Sure, you have to look at two different reports. You have to look at the Human Rights Report and the Caring and Safe Schools Report going back to 2018, 2019. Comparing those two numbers, you can see suspensions issued for hate crimes relative to the total number of hate crimes broken down by hate crime type. And then if you do the same analysis looking at this most recent reported year, you will come across the statistics that I provided.
So is it your position, sir, that all instances of anti-Semitism were reported, that existed in the, were reported, and therefore all resulted in a suspension?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I'm getting lost a little bit in the 100%. So are you suggesting that previously, 5 years ago, that anti-Semitism was treated differently, and that all instances of anti-Semitism, which 100% would suggest, were identified and then therefore led to a suspension? Is that what?
All reported instances of anti-Semitism 5 years ago resulted in a suspension. Most recently, 10% of reported instances, closer to 10%, I believe the number is 14%, resulted in a suspension. I am not suggesting that all incidents of anti-Semitism were reported either then nor now, but the data is, I'm quite limited in the data that I have available because as the point of my delegation gets across, I hope got across, the TDSB does not publish systemic anti-Semitism data as required by law. So you're right to point out that it's not a perfect analysis. I'm doing the best analysis that I can based on the information that is available. And that analysis would get a lot better if the TDSB could comply with its legal obligations.
I have nothing further, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Trustee Dawson is next. Go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair. Just in building off of what Trustee McLean had said, is it, so with the 100%, is it your assertion that all incidents of anti-Semitism are coming from students?
Sorry, what I'm doing is presenting the data that the TDSB has made available back to you, right? What your reports say, going back to 2018, is that there was, I don't have the exact number in front of me, X number of instances of anti-Semitism, X number of incidents of hate crimes, and correspondingly, X number of suspensions issued for hate crimes, right? And so comparing those numbers, it results in 100%. It appears as though 100% of incidents of hate crimes and anti-Semitism resulted in a suspension 5 years ago. Now that exact same analysis, that exact same number in comparison is 14%. I understand what you're saying about how suspension data is not necessarily fulsome of who could possibly have committed a hate crime, but I think the numbers are still stark enough to convey the same point. And again, I would reiterate that I would like to see the TDSB publish the information it is required to at law so that a real analysis can be done.
Okay. Thank you for your delegation. And actually, if you could submit it to us in writing, that would be helpful. I'd like to look up some of the data you've referenced. So thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Trustee Pei.
Thank you, Aaron, for your delegation. I have a question regarding clarification regarding is what type of data you're looking for the board to provide. I think you make the assertion like break the law. So what you're looking for? What type of data you're looking for? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you can see in the report itself the data that is presented as it relates to racial and ethnic origin breakdown. And you can see from the report itself that the same information is not provided in relation to religious breakdown. And when looking at the Anti-Racism Act, you can see that the same requirements apply to all three of those. So it seems quite clear to me that the TDSB does not comply with its legal obligations to produce systemic anti-Semitism data because it provides none. It doesn't even provide the same level of analysis that it provides in relation to other types of hate and discrimination. There are other problems with the report and the way in which it looks at that other data as well, but I think that that's probably a topic for another day.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just looking around in the room, online, seeing no other questions from trustees of clarification. Thank you again for your delegation, Mr. Kucharis.
Thank you.
And my apologies because I feel, oh, hold on. Is it for this?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing the delegations tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Let's see. So it looks like we are through all of the delegations. Thank you again to all the delegates. And we are going to move on in the agenda. We have the Community Advisory Committee reports, Special Education Advisory Committee report of June 10th, 2024, membership update, and right of parents, guardians, students with disabilities, special education needs to know about TDSB programs, services, and supports, and how to access them. Welcome to the chair of our Special Education Community Advisory, our Special Education Advisory Committee, SEAC, Mr. David Lipovsky.
Give me one sec. I will be ready for action.
Welcome.
One sec. Here we go. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. When you got elected as school trustees, you got yourself into an endless conveyor belt of issues hitting you. Not enough time, and probably a sense that most of them are overwhelming, and that too often there isn't much you as a trustee can do. Let me give you one that is a big problem, whose solution is not controversial, and where you can make a huge difference. I sound like a sales pitch, but it isn't. As the chair of your Special Education Advisory Committee, I come to you for the first time with an important request for you to intervene with a specific action that will significantly help tens of thousands of families of kids with special education needs. And you don't need to budget another dime. Yeah, it sounds like a sales pitch, but it's true. It's an issue that we've tried to resolve over 8 years working with staff without, unfortunately, success. So what is it? If you're a parent of a child with a special education need, you just don't go to your local school, enroll in the local classes, deal with the standard operating procedure for the mainstream of the student population. You've got to find out what particular programs, services, supports, alternatives, options are available for your child's needs. Where to get them, who you got to talk to, how to advocate for them. I'm lucky enough to have a law degree, in fact, two, to help me with that. Most parents don't. And unfortunately, while it should be easy to make this information readily findable, easy to read, and available, it isn't. TDSB is like a restaurant that will not give us a menu, but expects us to order. It is recurringly hard to find this out. Now, it's not because anyone wants to conceal it. It's because there's a system set up that just doesn't work. And what we're asking you to do is not to take it over and design it and operate it. That's operational. But it's to set for the staff a priority that this must be fixed, and to report back to you on it. So first, how do I know it's a problem? Well, we know from multiple sources. First, I've been on SEAC for 9 years. We've had evolving membership. Everybody agrees. It's everybody's experience, but not just the individuals. On SEAC, there are representatives of a significant number of disability community organizations who get calls from parents who have the same problem and then report this back at the SEAC table over and over. No one says, oh, that's not a problem at all. Everyone agrees this is not controversial for us. In fact, any number of our SEAC volunteers have said their organizations, their paid staff or their volunteers have to fill in by trying to figure it out for the parents and explain it to them because the parents have so much trouble too often finding it out from TDSB. How else do we know? Well, we decided, SEAC did, 2018, to conduct an online survey. We heard back from, I think, about 1,600 parents. And we had a couple of volunteer law students I was working with dedicate their time to synthesize it into a report that we've given to the staff multiple times. It reports parents over and over saying it's hard to find out, it's hard to navigate, it's hard to get answers. Not because the staff are mean or nasty, because the system's broken. And we need a system fix, and we need you to get that started. And I got to tell you, and I'll send you the report if you want it, but if we assume that half of the people in that report are lying, that they are reciting things that never happened, we still have and I wouldn't make that assumption at all, but if we made that very strong assumption, there would still be a big problem. How else do we know there's a problem? We know there's a problem because when I was teaching at Osgood, had a couple of volunteer law students, and I assigned them, go to the website at TDSB. I didn't predict an answer. I said, just pretend you've got kind of a grade 11 or 12 education. You got a kid who's not learning to their ability. You don't know any fancy terminology. And you want to know what to do. You want to know where to go for help and what's available. And the report back we got, it's hard to find it out. And if you even find where to look, it's all in education jargon, which educators speak, but a lot of parents don't. How else do we know? Well, because in 2018, the provincial government appointed an expert committee, half from the disability community, half from educators across the province, to review the education system, the K-12 system, from the perspective of students with disabilities, and report what needs to be changed. I had the privilege of serving on that committee. In fact, I had the privilege in my community advocacy role of leading the fight to get the government to set it up. Well, our report, which was released in 2022, found that the problem I'm describing here is a problem that's province-wide. And it wasn't like disability sector representatives on our committee like, oh, I don't know, the mainstream disability community organizations said this is a problem, and the educators are going, no, it's not. There was unanimous agreement. We couldn't pass on this issue. We couldn't pass a recommendation unless the province was satisfied that 75% of our committee agreed. So with all of that, and by the way, while no one at our committee from staff have ever acknowledged the problem, no one's disproven it. So what's the answer to date? What does the board tell us that they do? And this is not controversial. They say, first, it is the responsibility of the principal to give this information to parents. Well, there's 40,000 kids with special education needs, and what? My guess, 580 principals? Do the math. They will have not time to run they will not have time to run their schools, eat, or go to the bathroom. If they've got to re-explain it all, find it out and deliver it to them. Moreover, the principals who are dedicated and hardworking don't necessarily know all the information. If you go to a principal and say, hey, my child has this need, what programs are there, where should I be looking, and so on, they don't necessarily know. There are times they don't. We have practical experience with this. So then we're told you can look at the website. Well, I told you about that. A lot of the information isn't there. If it is, it's hard to find. If you find it, it's in education speak. But there's key things that aren't there. So the third thing we're told is they give out brochures. There's several brochures. And there are, but they suffer from the same problem. The jargon that's impenetrable, the lack of key information. I got to tell you, I looked at some of these. If you can find the word disability, you got to read pages before you even find it. But a lot of the key information you need isn't there. And I'm not telling you anything that we haven't told staff for years. In fact, before I get that, the fourth thing we're told is, well, the parents will be told about this when they go to an SST meeting, a school team meeting. They've all got initials, except you may not get there if you've not had enough information to be able to come forward and point out that there's a problem and that your child's having difficulty learning and you want to get involved. That's kind of seeing the world through the lens of the school administrators, not through the lens of parents. And I got to tell you, parents of students with special ed needs, and I'm one of them, life is not exactly a picnic where we got tons of time to hunt around for this information. I am being gentle. So, in the face of this, what have we done at SEAC? Number one, we've presented it. Number two, we presented it in a detailed motion to your predecessors, except for a couple of you who've been on the board a long time, in a motion that was passed on June 13th, 2016. We've been trying to raise this for 8 years. We've raised it over and over at SEAC meetings with senior staff, and they've changed several times, so it's not like it's one set of staff. It's been several. And then a couple of years ago, we set up a kindergarten to grade 12 advisory committee to give advice, or subcommittee to deal with the provincial report I told you about. And I've been centrally involved in that. And we sat down with staff last fall, and we literally went through some of those brochures and websites, kind of line at a time sometimes, pointing out the problems. Like, this isn't just talking in vague terms. And it should have been obvious. What's the staff responded with? Well, to their credit, they sat and listened to us and were very collegial, as they've been throughout. There's no hostility, collegial. But they made, at our suggestion, they put some FAQs up on the website. That's a good start, but it doesn't cover 90% of what we need, and it also had more of the jargon. And now they've come before you with a report, and the report, number one, does not acknowledge the problem. Number two, lists for you a long list of brochures that are available. Well, guess what? Look at that list. That proves my point, because those brochures are the problem. They don't give us what we need, and they are written in that jargon. Now, this is not rocket science to fix. By the way, the end of the staff report, which I'm very indebted to staff for putting together, basically says staff are continuing to work together with SEAC, and we'll continue to work together. Well, the working together has been us giving the feedback and us giving the feedback and us giving the feedback. And we don't see right now before you, what staff didn't come before you with is exactly what we're calling for, which is a plan of a communication strategy, a plan of action. Now, trustees aren't going to write it. What we're asking you to do is to say to staff, number one, this problem needs to be fixed. Number two, it's got to become a priority. And number three, we'd like to see a plan, and we'd like to see how it's going. And we at SEAC are quite eager to work together on this, but we shouldn't have to start writing the leaflets, which is kind of the point of frustration we're at. If you hear frustration in my voice, it's not with the people we're working with, because they're good people, but it's with the results we're getting. So I conclude by saying, if you want to live up to the words of your multi-year strategic plan that you passed, parents as partners, removing barriers, I can't think of a better way to start than this. If you want to live up to the new PPM from the province that says that you should review your communication strategies with the parents, even though the Ford government didn't say a word about the particular barriers facing parents of kids with special education needs, this is a good way. If you want to make the duty to accommodate people with disabilities, including students with disabilities, that is imposed on you by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Human Rights Code, if you want to make that work and fulfill the board's obligation, it starts by letting us know in easy to find terms, for those who aren't online, for those who don't speak the jargon, or if they even speak the jargon, they don't speak the language, in ways they can access it. And so we've come to you to take a simple action, and please support our motion. And we want to present this to the trustees as a whole. I'm going to be asking to appear, but it would help if the priorities or the Program and School Services Committee endorsed this request, acknowledged the need, and support a recognition that the staff should come back with an operational plan to show that they are that there's going to be some new action, not just more of the same. We've waited 8 years. Please don't make us wait another 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lepofsky. I have Trustee Laskin on the speakers list.
Thank you very much. I'm not a member of the committee, but I'm here to just support the fact that communication is critical. And when this comes to board, should the committee wish to send it forward, I would definitely support it. But in the meantime, I listened really carefully to what you said to us. You forgot our role, because if a parent is having difficulty, especially trying to find things on our website, please ask them to contact their trustee, because part of our role is to help them navigate the system. And don't get me wrong, I don't know everything about special education, but I sure know who I can funnel the questions to find out the information. So until there's good information in, my former colleague Donna Cansfield used to say, Canadian Tire language, I would really ask the committee through you to let parents that are having difficulty navigating for their children to contact their trustee. Thank you.
Thank you. If we're successful, we will alleviate you of that burden, but in any event, thank you, and I will.
Thank you. Trustee McLean.
Thank you, and through the chair, thank you, Mr. Lepofsky, for your presentation tonight and your years of service on SEAC. I'm interested in when your subcommittee actually sat down with staff and began to break down one or more of the brochures and tried to indicate and be specific about the language that didn't work and was too education speak and needed to be more layman's and more helpful for parents. Did staff agree that these were appropriate changes? And did the changes that you highlighted, that the subcommittee highlight, actually result in, changes in what the TDSB produced ultimately?
Thank you for the question. Let me give you my, let me put it this way. We basically concluded they need a total rewrite. In other words, it's not like you go through and change this word for that word. Like if it isn't even clear until multiple pages in that this is about students with disabilities as part of the population, a key central part. Now, no one's going to read any further. I mean, people who are busy aren't going to read 8 pages to find out. So they need a total rewrite. And we were told, in fairness to the staff, that the staff we're meeting with, have a ton of work on their plate. So I think if the board, the trustees, articulate this at a policy level as a major priority, then the staff may have to be assisted. Moreover, the people who were writing these, if you want to get granular, were in the spec ed department. They know the special education department. They know the technical stuff, but they're not, and I don't mean a criticism, they're not communication staff. They're not, their skill set isn't in writing in plain language for the public. So I don't fault them. Their skill set is that which, they brought them to where they are. So there's been a problem with, in that regard. We were told at one meeting or in one context that the board has to use the language that the Ministry of Education uses. And respectfully, that is not true. You're not somehow under, I don't know of a single policy direction from the ministry that says you can't explain things in plain language in a brochure. And the moment that someone at the Ministry of Education objects to the TDSB putting out a leaflet to all parents, because there are parents who don't even know their kids have these needs. They haven't been identified yet. They just know their child is struggling. The moment you put that out or put a paragraph in that, a regular and a different paragraph in the periodic email blast that we all get, and it's not in ministry education speak, if the ministry objects, please let me know. I got a Twitter feed and I periodically get the media calling me looking for stories. That would be a lovely one. I don't think they're going to. But the bottom line is there is no current plan that we know of. We were given a short-term plan a year ago. It addressed a couple of things. Parts of it were accomplished, parts of it were not. But we are really no further ahead in terms of actually being in a position where parents can easily find this information. The other thing is, this doesn't have to be all solved at once to be solved at all. One clear new 3-page brochure, I'm making up links, that is sent to all parents digitally or whatever and physically at school. Not just parents of kids who we know have special education needs, but just an introduction and a who to call, that might well get a whole lot of progress.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I have Trustee King is next on the speakers list. And this is just a reminder that we'll be recessing at 6:30 and then back for a special board meeting at 7, which goes till 9.
I will be brief.
It's not to rush you. I'm just providing some
nickname
information.
My nickname at law school was Verbofsky, and I've tried to live up to it.
Thank you, Mr. Lebowski. And just to finish the reminder, and we'll be back at 9 to complete this agenda for PSSC. So Trustee King is the next trustee on the list.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and I completely own that by asking another question. I'm keeping you going, so it's okay. I'm just, I think I'm trying to understand, and I know you've spent quite a bit of time speaking to various groups here, so thank you for that. I'm newer to this conversation, so I'm trying to understand. I've heard that there have been several years of conversation and sharing of recommendations. Over that time, we've seen some changes that have been enacted by staff, but we've heard from you clearly that they're not sufficient and far enough to meet the needs of the communities that you're representing. And I'm just trying to understand, even if this is formalized into a communication plan, what changes in the delivery? I'm trying to hear your comment on where the gap might be, and if it's something in the interpretation or something along the way that's a barrier between what's being suggested and what's being picked up.
Okay, easy solution, and I believe we've delivered it, as has the provincially appointed committee I advised. There's a list of information that people need. We've identified it. I won't go through it all now, but it's in the 2016 motion that's in the brief that I submitted to you folks last night. And there's a bit more in the provincial, but the staff have it. There's a list of categories of information people need. And what we've already advised is the board needs to look at each of the different ways they can deliver it. One is a web page. They've got a standalone web page, but one that's linked to on the front page of the website of the TDSB that doesn't use fancy language. Some people don't even know what special education means. So clear language so people know what it is. And where instead of going to the page talking about commitments to human rights and anti-oppression and all that stuff, start talking about kids who are having trouble learning. And going through the steps of what can be done, where you go, how to find out, who to talk to, and what's available. Then having options of like what different programs there are. I will tell you that when my child has, I'm not going to go into details, but a particular disability, I called the the principal at the local school before I registered, and I said, well, what's available? And the principal didn't know, and it took phone calls and finally getting to a special ed consultant to just find out the options in kindergarten. That should be clear. One of the other things we've been told is you can find it, I forgot to mention this, you can find it in the special education plan. Have any of you tried reading it? It's the cure to insomnia. It goes on for over 100 pages. It is not a guide to lay parents, but we've been told parents can consult there. They can look there, it's in that. That's not fair. So the brochures, simply rewritten in plain language, which the web content could echo, but also making it available not just to parents we know about, but parents we're not sure about. We could have videos, and I know there's been a bit of work on that, and I've had some talk with Louise about the possibility of doing more. But start with maybe even just a statement of parents of what we're prepared to do. Like, how about a statement saying, if your child has a disability, the school board's obligation and commitment is we're going to do our best to accommodate your child's learning needs. Like, just saying that to parents would mean a whole lot. And I'm not talking about something that's over the top. It's only the fundamental law of Canada, right? So there's these kind of things that could be done. And we've shared these ideas. We're happy to share them again, but in a plan where it's going to actually happen.
And I have Acting Director Shrishko.
Thank you, Manshu. Thank you very much. And through the chair, I also want to express my deep gratitude and tremendous admiration to Mr. Lepofsky and as well all members of SEAC. This is a committee that is made of volunteers who bring such expertise and lived experience and advice to us to be the very, very best that we can. David and I have an honest and open relationship, and there are no surprises in our presentation and conversation and how we can be moving forward together more strongly. The K-12 working committee at the ministry level was instrumental in providing advice to how boards can be strengthening their practices and doing better, in particular communication. I appreciate that System Superintendent Palmer has been working together with our communications team in hearing the frustrations from the committee. The special education plan is really long. It is a requirement by law, and our SEAC members actually help edit it every year. Mr. Lepofsky is absolutely correct. We need to be making products that speak in very simple language for parents to have access. If I may, David, and I don't think that you would disagree, I think that we've put in a lot of initiatives to try and move our practice. We're not there yet, and freely accept Mr. Lepofsky's and SEAC's feedback. Staff absolutely commit to continue to working with the working group. We have an action plan that is ready that actually reflects the voices and the priorities of SEAC. We will bring that to our SEAC meeting in October. The motion from the committee, if I may, through the chair, I do recommend that this is referred to staff with the commitment to be working alongside SEAC and to be reporting back to the board through its existing reports that will be connected to our new multi-year strategic plan, and we will provide updates on the action plan and seek SEAC's approval of it so that we can action some of the ideas that we have, including having SEAC members be videotaped speaking plainly about the pathways that David is talking about, and to be reviewing our website certainly to strengthen it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Trustee Earhart.
Thank you so much to the work of SEAC and for bringing this forward today. Speaking as a parent as well as a trustee, this is very important. I think what has struck me here as being different from my lived experience at the board as a parent is that proactively inform all parents, guardians, students, including parents, guardians, and students with disability special education needs. To my knowledge, there is no standard of system-wide proactive communication outside of the website that refers to the rights and obligations in a plain language way outside of if your child is struggling, please connect with your teacher. I have a lot of learning to still do on our site, but I think that is a very important nuance of all that has been presented here. And I wanted to just see if this was referred back to staff, what staff comments were on that in particular in terms of the commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. Acting Director Shrishko.
Thank you very much. And definitely plain language for parents in a proactive way is something that continues to be a goal. And I would say a problem of practice that we have yet to puzzle out is placement opportunities and locations for parents. So really want to be trying to think creatively about how to do that meaningfully. And I know that is a common frustration for our SEAC members. So we will continue to think of ideas, try new methods. It is complicated, certainly, but we will do our very best.
Thank you. So at this point, I think I need a mover and a seconder for the first part, the membership update. The PSSC recommendation, whereas Special Education Advisory Committee, SEAC, has received a nomination from the Association of Bright Children, ABC, for Jessica Miklos to be its alternate representative, and whereas this candidate meets the Ministry of Education and board criteria for eligibility, therefore be it resolved that Jessica Miklos be appointed to the Special Education Advisory Committee as the alternate representative for the Association for Bright Children, ABC, for a term ending November 14th, 2026. A mover and a seconder. Moved by Trustee Dawson, seconded by Trustee Shan. All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And the second part, it's up on the screen. And the PSSC, I need a mover and a seconder. PSSC recommends that the following be referred to staff to work with SEAC. The original? It's up on the board. Yeah, I'm asking. I'm asking for a mover and a seconder. Yes. I'm asking for a mover and a seconder, and it's up on the screen. Moved by Trustee Dawson, seconded.
Second.
Trustee Goes?
I'll second it.
Okay, Trustee Goes seconding. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Yes, it's on the screen. The referral to staff to work with SEAC regarding further collaboration and meeting the goals of SEAC. It's on the screen. So that's what I see on the screen. It's the same as what I see at the very beginning. That's the recommendation and all of the whereas. Yes. Yes. So just for clarification, the mover and seconder was the recommendation that the following be referred to staff to work with SEAC regarding further collaboration. It was the recommendation by staff.
It is not our motion.
Yeah. So are we clear on what we're moving and seconding? Okay. And we have all in favor? Aye. And there were no one opposed? Okay. And that carries. Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Lipovsky, for all of your incredible work and advocacy on SEAC and beyond. It's very much appreciated, and thank you again.
Thank you.
So at this point, it's 6:34. We're going to take a recess until 9 p.m. Sorry. After the special meeting.
Oops. That's all right.
We'll be back after the special meeting of the board. So we're on recess and we're coming back to complete all of the other agenda items for PSSC. Thank you.